My name is Emily Carter. I'm 30 years old, a financial consultant working at an investment firm in New York. I've spent nearly 6 years building my career late nights at the office, 100-page analyses, and those first clients I had to fight twice as hard to keep. I always believed that if I was good enough, persistent enough, everything would eventually fall into place. But I was wrong. One Sunday evening, my family called me home for dinner like usual. Nothing seemed out of place, the familiar table, the familiar voices, until my father said something that made everything stop. If you don't apologize to your brother, we will stop supporting you. Not living expenses, not pocket money, but the financial investment they had promised to help me grow my business, the very thing I depended on to build my future. The reason? Simply because I refused to take the blame for something I never did. I sat there, looking at each member of my family, the people I always believed would stand by me, but no one said a word. And in that moment, I realized this was no longer just an argument. This was the moment I had to choose: stay silent to be accepted, or lose everything to stay true to myself. My brother, Daniel Carter, is 3 years older than me, and in my family's eyes, he has always been the one who's right. I grew up in a home where everything seemed to revolve around Daniel. From dinners to vacations, even the smallest conversations, his opinion was always the one that lasted. Whenever there was a conflict, the solution was simple. Daniel told his version, and that version became the truth. And me, I learned to stay quiet. Not because I was weak, but because I thought that was how you kept the peace. I remember one time I stayed up all night to finish an important presentation for work. When I shared it with my family, all I got was a small nod. But the moment Daniel mentioned even a minor achievement, the entire table lit up with excitement. I got used to that. I really did. Until a few weeks before that dinner, Daniel didn't get promoted at the investment firm where he worked. And somehow, the story got twisted into being my fault. Just because during a family gathering, I answered honestly when one of his colleagues asked about his personality. No ill intent, no hidden agenda, but to Daniel, it was betrayal. And to my family, that was enough for them to believe I was the one in the wrong. That dinner didn't feel like any other. There was no casual conversation, no small talk. The air felt so heavy I could hear every clink of a knife against a plate. My father, Robert Carter, wasn't sitting upright like usual. He leaned slightly forward, his hands clasped together, his expression no longer calm but carrying something already decided. He didn't look at me right away. He looked at Daniel first as if to confirm something, then turned to me. "Emily," he said slowly, his voice low, "this can't go on any longer." I didn't respond, I just looked at him. He let out a long breath, as if trying to stay composed, but his voice began to tremble slightly. "This family has always valued respect above all else, and what you've done to your brother is unacceptable." I felt my chest tighten. "You will apologize to Daniel, a real apology, and if you don't—" He paused, his gaze harder than ever. "Then we will withdraw all financial support for your business." It wasn't a threat. It was a decision. My mother, Linda Carter, remained silent, but her hand gently rested on Daniel's shoulder, a small gesture, but it said everything. Daniel didn't look at me. He just sat there, as if he were the one who had been hurt. And in that moment, I understood this was no longer about right or wrong. This was about whether I was willing to bow my head. If you've ever been in a situation where your family pressured you to take the blame, just to keep the peace, comment 1. I didn't respond right away. The room stayed silent. The wall clock ticked, each second dry and sharp. I looked at my father, then at Daniel, and finally at my mother. No one avoided my gaze, but no one stood up for me either. I took a slow breath. Okay, just one word, no explanation, no argument. But this time, it didn't mean I agreed. It meant I had made a decision. I stood up, pulling my chair back so gently it barely made a sound. No one called after me, no one asked where I was going. I walked out of the dining room, down the long hallway that led to the backyard, where a warm yellow light reflected over the small lake my family had always been so proud of. I paused for a few seconds, not to hesitate, but to make sure there was nothing left I wanted to hold on to. That night, I didn't go back to my bedroom. I drove straight to a 2-4 hour cafe on 8th Street, the place where I used to work part-time in college. The cold white lights, the steady hum of the coffee machine, made everything feel more real. I sat down and opened my laptop. Not to cry, not to call anyone, but to plan my exit. I started reviewing my financial options, going through my personal savings, and sent a short email to an old friend, Sophia Miller, who had told me more than once that if I ever needed a place to start over, she would always be there. I hit send, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. I left the cafe before the sun had fully risen. A thin layer of morning fog blurred the glass buildings, and New York City at 5 a.m. felt strangely quiet, nothing like the pace I was used to. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to a small co-working space in Brooklyn, a place I had signed up for long ago but rarely used. I needed somewhere. No one knew me. I sat down, opened my laptop, and continued refining my financial plan. Everything started to become clearer: investments, cash flow, what I could hold on to, and what I would have to let go. Right then, my phone vibrated. A message from a name I didn't expect. Jason Reed, Daniel's team lead at the firm. Just one line. "Emily, we need to talk. Did you send anything out this morning?" I froze. I had never contacted Jason. There was no reason for him to message me, unless... My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. "Please tell me you didn't do it." My heart started racing. I looked at the screen, then back at my laptop where the planning files I had just created were still open. I hadn't sent anything. I hadn't done anything. But clearly, something was happening, something that had Daniel panicking. And in that moment, I realized maybe this story had never been as simple as they made it seem. I hadn't even had the chance to respond when my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a call. The name on the screen: Ethan Cole, HR, Director at Daniel's company. I hesitated for a second, then answered. "Emily, I'm sorry for calling so suddenly." His voice was calm and steady. "But there's some information regarding Daniel that we believe you should know." I stayed silent. Not because I was surprised, but because I could feel it. This was exactly what Daniel had been afraid of. Ethan continued. "We've received several internal reports over the past few weeks from two of Daniel's subordinates, Kevin Brooks and Laura Hayes." I tightened my grip on the phone. "These reports indicate that Daniel has repeatedly taken credit for projects that weren't his and has engaged in behavior that created pressure and a negative work environment." I closed my eyes for a second. Everything was starting to make sense. And to avoid accountability, Ethan paused, his voice lowering. "Daniel provided a different explanation to your family, that his missed promotion was due to damaging information being spread by you." A long silence followed. No one said anything. It wasn't me who sabotaged him. He sabotaged himself. I opened my eyes and looked out the window. The city was beginning to wake. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt clear. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do. I left the co-working space in Brooklyn once the sun was fully up and took a train to Hoboken, New Jersey, a place I had visited a few times but never imagined staying longer. I sat in a small cafe overlooking the Hudson River, my coffee slowly going cold in front of me, trying to process everything I had just heard. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a new name. Martha Lewis, my family's longtime neighbor. I was a little surprised, but I answered. "Emily, are you okay?" Her voice was gentle, but there was urgency beneath it. I gave a short reply that I was fine. She paused for a moment, then said, "You can't imagine what's happening at your house right now." My chest tightened. "Your father, he just came back from Daniel's company. And this time he's not staying quiet." I didn't say anything. I just tightened my grip around my coffee cup. He spoke with someone named Richard Evans, Daniel's superior. And everything, it's not what Daniel told everyone. I closed my eyes. Martha's voice grew lower. "Your father is in shock. And your mother, she's been crying nonstop. That house has never been this quiet." I looked out at the slow-moving river beyond the glass. A place that was once filled with controlling voices was now left with nothing but the truth. And the truth was no longer on their side. That afternoon, I left Hoboken and took a train down to Jersey City, a place I had never imagined starting over. It wasn't far from New York, but it felt like I had stepped into a completely new chapter. I pulled my suitcase through quiet streets and stopped in front of an old but well-kept building. This was the address Sophia Miller had sent me. Just as I was about to ring the bell, the door opened. A young woman stepped out, her hair neatly tied back, her gaze direct but warm. "Emily?" "I'm Natalie Brooks, Sophia's roommate. She had something urgent come up, but she asked me to wait for you." I gave a small nod and stepped inside. The apartment was small and simple, not luxurious, but warm. No pressure, no judgmental eyes. Natalie handed me a glass of water and said something very simple. "Here, no one asks who you're supposed to be. You just get to start over." I sat down, and for the first time in hours, I let myself relax. That night, I didn't think about my family. I opened my laptop, updated my entire personal financial plan, reached out to a few former clients, and applied for freelance collaboration with an independent consulting firm. No one backing me. No promises being made. But this time, everything was mine. And somehow that made me feel stronger than ever. 2 days later, I left Jersey City to meet a potential client in Philadelphia, a small freelance opportunity, but enough for me to truly start over. I chose a quiet cafe near Rittenhouse Square, opened my laptop, and reviewed the financial plan I had stayed up all night preparing. Things were finally starting to fall into a new rhythm. Just then, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar name appeared, Thomas Green. I answered. "Emily, this is Thomas, an old friend of your father." I stayed silent. "I'm with him right now, and I think you should hear this." I could hear heavy breathing on the other end. Then my father's voice, no longer firm, no longer controlled, but a man trying to say something he had never said before. "Emily, I was wrong." Just 4 words, but enough to make me pause. "I believe Daniel. Without asking you, I put you in a position where you had to choose between yourself and your family, and I didn't realize how much that hurt you." I looked out the window, where the trees swayed gently in the wind. No excuses. No justification. Just the truth. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he continued, his voice lower, "but I want you to know, this time, I see it." I didn't respond immediately, because some apologies take time to understand. If you've ever waited for a sincere apology, no excuses, no avoidance, comment 1. 3 weeks later, I moved to Boston, a city I once saw as just a temporary destination, but had now become the place where I would begin a new life. My small apartment near Cambridge wasn't big or luxurious, but it had enough light and quiet. Every morning, I made my own coffee, opened my laptop, and started working with the first clients I had rebuilt from scratch. No more support from my family. No more conditions attached. But also, no more pressure to prove anything to them. One weekend afternoon, while I was organizing my documents, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there stood Grace Coleman, a new client I had recently signed for remote financial consulting. She smiled. "I just wanted to meet in person the person who completely changed the way I think about money." I smiled back softly. "No noise, no drama," but enough for me to know I was on the right path. I closed the door, leaned gently against the wall, and looked around my small apartment. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need anyone's acceptance to feel worthy. A week later, I found myself in San Francisco, standing on a small bridge near Golden Gate Park after meeting a new client. The city was vibrant, but in that moment, everything felt quiet. I received a message from an unfamiliar name, Olivia Bennett. "I heard your story through a friend. I just wanted to say, you gave me the courage to stand up for myself." I read the message a few times. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it felt so familiar. I used to be the one who stayed silent, the one who was misunderstood, the one who believed I had to accept everything just to belong. But the truth is, you don't have to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. I put my phone away and watched people pass by, each carrying their own story that no one fully sees. If this story reminds you of yourself, leave a 1 below. It's not just a number, it's a way of saying you understand. And maybe the next story will be yours. If you've ever been treated as the less important one in your family, you'll understand this feeling.